Man, it has been too long since I've been able to live stream to you all. I know that it was a black screen there. Hi, how are you? This is John Greenwald Jr. I am, again, so sorry that it's always this long delay between videos and so on. So I apologize for that. For those of you who don't know, this is one of those behind the scenes videos, what I call the BTS Raws, where essentially it's just that. I have no idea what's going to happen. Generally, my dog gets in here somehow. I have two of them now. Puppy's a little bit older, but he's still a wild rascal. So you'll probably hear them. Again, these are very raw and uncut, but it's a way for me to be able to essentially communicate with you guys, talk to you. I've got this streaming on YouTube, X, Facebook at the moment. And then what I do is I go back to the segment that I recorded, clip it out, make it a little bit cleaner, take out any dog barks or any surprises that may happen, and just kind of go from there. Now, as I always do on these live streams, if you guys can put on there in the chats, if I'm sounding okay, volume's okay, any static, anything like that, it's a big help for me because sadly, I can only monitor so much with these live streams when it goes out live. And I'm a little bit of a perfectionist OCD, so I need everything perfect. So make sure that you let me know if this is okay. Apparently, a couple of you commented, yep, that you're being able to hear it okay. Okay, great. So again, this is how this works on the behind the scenes as I record this segment. So you'll kind of see me reset a little bit, and then I have a clip point in, a clip point out. And then towards the end of the presentation, this is where I kind of switch it to you guys to ask whatever questions that you want. It's a little bit hard for me because right now there's already 300 of you watching, just shy of it through the different social media streams, and we're just getting started. So it'll probably grow a little bit. So the chat window gets super crazy on my end. I do generally stick with the YouTube text because they stick out to me the most. This is not a ploy to get super chats. Anything that you guys do decide to donate through there goes 100% into the channel. Those light up with different colors on my side. So those stick out actually the most. So I do prioritize those and will take as many as I can here as we get going. So bear with me here because I just want to test one thing to make sure that it's going to be coming through. So let me just make sure that it is. All right. I hate these screens. They never work right. Okay. So again, we're going to dive into, if you couldn't tell from the description, the AATIP emails that I talked about yesterday. I'm not going to go into great detail here before we get started with the actual segment, but that's what I'm going to explore. So let me just go ahead, as long as everything is broadcasting okay, I'm just going to go ahead and reset here and then go ahead and start it. So bear with me here as I write down a time code, and then we're just going to go ahead and start. When I say goodbye, after I take some questions, don't worry, I'm going to come right back, and then, you know, we'll see if there's any other topic. But the original Q&A, I'm going to try and stick with the kind of subject at hand, so it all kind of stays topical, the AATIP email that I'm about to talk about. So I may be skipping around. I hope I don't miss any of you, but I might. And then when I come back from, again, saying goodbye the first time, I'll try and just take random questions for as long as we go here. So that said, just bear with me here. That's right, everybody. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and making this your live stream of choice. I'm your host, John Greenwald Jr., founder and creator of The Black Vault, and today we're diving into some new documents that I got. Surprise, surprise, this time from the Department of Defense, and they are about AATIP. Now, there's not a whole lot of them, so it's not going to take a whole lot of time to go over the documents themselves. And in fact, if you pay attention, you may have seen them before. But what's more interesting is on the side of the Pentagon, the action they took by redacting what they did in this particular FOIA release. And that was the specific mention of AATIP. Now, why that is, I'll give you their reason, but as you can imagine, I'm fighting it simply because I just don't agree with them. I don't believe that this is something that they should be redacting, number one. But number two, we discovered a new document that hasn't been out before in this FOIA release. So that's kind of cool. The bad thing, it's completely redacted from top to bottom. So let's just go ahead and get into it and kind of start dissecting this to see where we end up. Now, as I mentioned, this is all about an email that came out. It's been out for a few years, actually, that mentioned AATIP. Now, this goes all the way back. Let me get my screen here. This goes all the way back to 2020, February 14th, to be exact, when the Popular Mechanics article came out entitled Inside the Pentagon's Secret UFO Program. Now, the reason why I like to give this history is because I want to see I want to show, I should say, how this all unfolded for all of you and kind of what spawned the FOIA request that I did and put it in a little bit of chronological order for you guys. So this particular article, which came out in February of 2020, was a very lengthy article all about exactly what it says, what it labeled the Pentagon secret UFO program. General public more accurately refers to that as AATIP. I know it's controversial on whether or not AATIP was a big program, a real program, an official program. Did it study UFOs? Look, that's again, different videos in itself. But this particular article dissected Luis Elizondo's story and showed us a lot of new material. You'll see here in the screenshot. Let me just pull up the laser pointer here. You'll see here in the actual screenshot from the Popular Mechanics article, the performance review, or at least one of them, of Luis Elizondo. So again, we were seeing new documents that have never been seen before. So kudos to Tim McMillan for this 2020 article, simply because there was a lot of new stuff. And generally, you don't see that. You see a lot of rehash of the same exact thing. Copy and paste journalism is rampant out there. But this particular article gave quite a few things, including this. Now, it was a very interesting screenshot because, as you can tell, it wasn't even a screenshot of the actual document. It seemed to be a photograph of the document, and then you had all these strange redactions in it. Now, it was sorted to an anonymous source, as you can imagine. There were a few that were cited in this article, and one of which gave Tim McMillan / Popular Mechanics this particular document to publish. This was given to them to support Luis Elizondo in his role in AATIP. Now, obviously, this was really intriguing to me. Anybody who watches this channel, you know that I'm not a huge fan of anonymous sources. So although I take that material, I always just kind of cringe when I see the word anonymous. Now, fast forward to 2024. Sure, you can imagine who that anonymous source is, but hey, I'll let you guys decide that one. But this anonymous source gave Popular Mechanics this email and said the following: per SecDef, or the Secretary of Defense front office guidance to you and me, I took the liberty of drafting a memo, and then there was some redacted lines there, that helps you better assume the new responsibilities for AATIP. At your convenience, please review. It's very short on purpose, and let me know if you want me to put more meat on it. You kind of have another redaction here on the document that essentially cuts off the first part of this, and then you can kind of see in authorship, just want to make sure we answer the mail for the front office. And that was where it kind of cut off, and that's what we see in this Popular Mechanics article. So I think there was a little bit of added drama here with this particular screenshot and picture. Sadly, I think it was a little bit for, I think, mystique, if you ask me. And look, that's all fine, well and dandy. But some questions here, as more was revealed, kind of surfaced, and you'll see that in a moment when we see more of this email. But I wanted to kind of give you guys the root of where this came out in that Popular Mechanics article. Now, fast forward, that again was February 2020. In June of 2021, after me doing some digging, asking questions, pushing various people that I speak with, finally figured out a little bit more detail that I could use and provably use on the email. that allowed me to then structure a FOIA request to go after it because, well, I wanted it and I wanted to see what else was there because, as you just saw, that screenshot was fairly, minimal and there was quite a bit redacted. And at that point, you don't know how long that email was, how big that email was. So I went after it and then specifically filed what ultimately became case 21F 1154. Sparing you all the legal jargon that's just more boilerplate on my end. The brunt of the request was the following. I respectfully request a copy of an email thread with the subject line of, quote, draft DepSecDef letter unclassified, unquote, dated circa October 3rd, 2017, which was between Luis Elizondo, former OSD employee, and Neil Tipton. He actually still is, but worked within OUSDI, which is now OUSDINS. Also CC'd was Brennan McKernan, the United States Navy. Now, if you don't know Brennan McKernan's name, this one has finally been revealed publicly as connected to the UAP task force effort. Brennan McKernan from the U.S. Navy. Politico was the first one, I believe, that published Brennan's name. It had been bantered about. I had FOIAs about him, but I did not essentially really advertise it because there's not really a whole lot known about what his role is. And those requests are largely still open on my end and have been for a couple of years. But that's who Brennan McKernan was. And so I had found out that he was CC'd on this email as well. So in 2017, October, Brennan was involved. Luis Elizondo wrote the email and Neil Tipton with OUSDINS. Now, in June of 2022, okay, so just to put this in chronological order for you guys, the New York Post published the IG complaint, the Inspector General complaint filed by Luis Elizondo. Now, we had heard about this already quite a bit through various interviews that Luis Elizondo had done. Politico, again, had highlighted it. So this finally kind of dropped, had a few redactions, quite a few, but rightfully so. They were protecting the identity of some people that weren't known in the public sphere. However, some names were essentially revealed. One of which was, again, Brennan McKernan. But this was the full email that I was going after. And so now the general public can see what Luis Elizondo had put in his IG complaint. And this particular section here was what that screenshot was on the New York Post, or excuse me, on Popular Mechanics. But now we see it thanks to the New York Post. So you can see what I have already read to you with the addition now of greetings, Neil. Per SecDef's front office guidance to you and me, I took the liberty of drafting a memo at the unclassified level that helps you better assume the new responsibilities for AATIP. At your convenience, please review. It's very short on purpose, and let me know if you want me to put more meat on it. Brennan, same with you, please. No pride in authorship. Just want to make sure we answer the mail for the front office. Standing by, Lou. So now we saw the whole thing. So now you kind of get a better idea. Now it's in the public realm. We know who it was to, who was CC'd. Now it's all verifiable. In addition, we now see this October 3rd, 2017 email, the one in question that we were just talking about. That was September 25, 2017. Now on October 3rd, Tipton responds, getting spun back up. We'll read and get thoughts back today or tomorrow at Ford Meade, half the day today. So now we see the response. So more of the pictures being revealed. Now, I love this kind of stuff because it's like piecing together a puzzle. And this is reinforces my long held belief. FOIA is not everything because you do find these bits of pieces of evidence thanks to various investigative journalists, media, and you got to put it all together. I know some people think I say FOIA is everything. I assure you, I've never said that. And this is why, is because you get these pieces of the puzzle to work with, build off of, and then able to integrate that into FOIA requests and use it, because I can cite places like New York Post and so on. But what was also interesting to learn from the IG complaint, and again, some of this was kind of out there being bantered about, but putting the puzzle pieces together, Neil Tipton, who Elizondo was essentially passing the AATIP reins to, was named in the complaint as somebody that was committing wrongdoing, alleged wrongdoing that Luis Elizondo had highlighted. Now, I've read the whole complaint numerous times. I have zero idea what Neil Tipton did wrong. None, zero. I have asked, and I'll make this point quick, but I have asked Luis Elizondo through his attorney, Todd McMurtry, who fields a lot of those questions on Mr. Elizondo's behalf, and couldn't get an answer. I have no idea. This particular question was met with an answer that maybe more will be revealed in his book. And that was the answer that I got. So I'm not really sure what Tipton did, but he was one of the 3 individuals that Luis Elizondo had complained about. The other being Susan Goff, that is the public affairs official, which oddly, the public affairs official that actually issued the statement about Elizondo and his lack of responsibilities on AATIP was not Susan Goff. It was actually Christopher Sherwood. He was not actually made part of this complaint. He was mentioned in it, but he was not the one that had alleged wrongdoing. No idea why there. The third person being Gary Reed, everybody's favorite villain in this whole saga. So those were the 3 individuals that he had complained about to the IG that had alleged wrongdoing. Neil Tipton was one of them. So it was really strange because when you look at the fact that it was the day that Luis Elizondo resigned from the Pentagon, this was the same day that Neil Tipton responded to that September email. Maybe just a coincidence, I don't know. But it was like Neil Tipton says, okay, great. I'm what we found out through a different FOIA request was actually out on vacation. Neil Tipton says, okay, great. I'll go ahead and take a look at this. Getting back, spun back up. I'll get back to you today or tomorrow. That was the same day Elizondo said, nope, I'm done. Now, we didn't know about this resignation letter. There was a second one that was published. That one actually was submitted on October 4th. FOIA brought out the real one that was submitted on October 3rd. I say the real one because that was the first one. He had already resigned. A second letter popped up that next day. That's the one that we all know about. No real explanation there. I'm sure there's probably a good reason for it, but regardless, this was same day. Here is the signature by what I've determined was likely Elizondo's immediate boss, John Garrity. So you have some very interesting time coincidences here that Tipton says, yep, Elizondo resigns on the exact same day. One thing to point out too, when I said that there were some interesting questions now we've seen more of the puzzle, is the fact that Popular Mechanics and or the anonymous source you pick decided to redact and hide from all of you that the memo that they're talking about was at the unclassified level. I don't know why that would be. So, you know, just something to point out that was one of the redactions that they didn't want to show. And then obviously this line down here was Brennan, same with you. I can understand hiding Brennan McKernan's name, especially around that time in 2020. He wasn't even known, I don't think. I don't remember the exact date that his name kind of came out, but regardless, that I totally understand. But at the unclassified level, to me, I'm not really sure about that. So just something to point out, though. But last month I had published an article and I had posted out this on social media about how the AATIP saga was going to get weirder. And I think I've talked about it on this channel, but I'll say it again in this video. I usually only tease an article on the same day it comes out. I'm not a big fan of teases, but I do like to kind of alert people out there. There's quite a few different media outlets that you'll notice will cover documents that I get inside and outside the UFO genre. So a lot of times I will post those things out and just kind of alert, you know, those who care about watching the documents, there's a story coming. I know not everybody cares for teases, myself included, but there's a reason why I kind of do that. But then I had to cancel the story. A delay is a much better word for that. I didn't cancel it, but delay, because something that I was led to believe in this particular story was not necessarily true. So I had to really come back. And I learned that in the double and triple checking process right before I drop an article to ensure that I'm as accurate as possible. Everybody makes mistakes. I've made a ton of them. I'm sure my wife will tell you all about my mistakes in life. But joking aside, look, we're all human, but I do try and be as accurate as possible. So I had to delay the story because I was waiting for another tidbit that I had to complete the story. It ended up where I had to splice it into a couple different ones. So what I had published in this specific story was the fact that the DoD had released multiple emails that Luis Elizondo sent to Susan Goff in an effort to have her / the Department of Defense change their stance on him. And in these 3 particular pages was banter back and forth between Luis Elizondo and Neil Tipton. We've already gone over Neil Tipton. But there was one strange thing. We know that in the IG complaint, these 3 pages were also there. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read you all 3 pages, but I wrote about them at length, and I'll link in the show notes below. But what was absent was the AATIP email. The one email, the only one I should add, that mentioned AATIP. Now, that was really strange to me because if you're trying to get the Department of Defense Public Affairs Office to change your stance on AATIP, and the reason you wanted to do that was because you directed a program called AATIP, and you had an email that referenced AATIP and how you were transferring the responsibilities that you had to someone else. That, to me, is your smoking gun to prove that this was something that needed to be changed. So when I got the FOIA response of Elizondo's email to Susan Goff, and I also found one to Christopher Sherwood, and the attachments, it took quite some time, and I had to fight for them. Originally, they wouldn't give them to me. Finally got them. The email that said AATIP was missing. I confirmed with the Department of Defense that these 3 pages were the only ones there. So I said to myself, why would you not do this? Is the DoD lying? I would totally buy that. So I went to Luis Elizondo, and again through his attorney, and specifically asked him, is there a reason that only 3 of the 4 pages that were in your IG complaint in this particular section and banter between Neil Tipton and Elizondo and passing the reins, so to speak, of AATIP, why that wasn't there? And here's the response that I got on the record. It is, quote, "It is no surprise Mr. Elizondo does not trust the Pentagon's PAO office or Public Affairs Office due to their history of waffling and providing false information. Mr. Elizondo is not surprised you received a comment like that from the same people who have been inaccurate in the past. There is a difference between the Pentagon saying to you that they didn't receive it and actually receiving it but claiming they didn't. This should be no surprise to you. Saying that DoD confirmed to me versus DoD told me are 2 different things. Not sure why you still believe them when even you have admitted they have a tendency to be wrong and misleading. It's perplexing why you trust the Pentagon on certain things, but then admit you don't trust them with other things. Why is this any different other than the fact it deals with my client? The fact remains that the email is legitimate and the DoD has a copy of it." Now, if you see up here, I never endorsed the DoD's position. For the sake of the audio version, I'll read you exactly what I asked. The DoD confirmed to me that the documents attached to Mr. Elizondo's email to Susan Goff did not contain that the following email, which is the only that mentions AATIP. Forgive my stuttering there. I put the screenshot at the bottom of this email for reference. Arguably, this would be the most important since it talked about AATIP responsibilities to Neil Tipton. However, the DoD said it was never sent in Mr. Elizondo's email to Goff. Is there a reason he only sent 3 of the 4 pages to Goff that he later put in his IG complaint? It seems the AATIP email is the most important one if he was trying to get Goff to change the DoD stance about his role on AATIP. That's not an endorsement, but a question framed to the only evidence that I had available to me. If he wanted to come back and say it wasn't true, great, I would have published that. I published 100% of the statements that came to me. So clearly, I didn't really get an answer to that other than the email was legitimate. I didn't say it wasn't, nor did the DoD at that point, but that's sadly where we ended up. Now, what they did say, and this may be the root of it, was this document is an attachment to email correspondence from a private citizen to a DoD employee. The DoD cannot validate the authenticity of the material contained in this document. Personal information has been redacted to protect the privacy of individuals contained in the document. So when they released those three, they released them as attachments that Luis Elizondo sent to Goff, but then said that they wouldn't verify the authenticity. This to me is completely unorthodox and out of the ordinary, 100%. And why that is, I don't know. Generally, when you have a situation like this, they'll search for the emails. I mean, I asked them to specifically give me the attachments that Mr. Elizondo had sent in. Even though they're marked as unclassified, you would think that the Department of Defense would ensure that they are unclassified instead of just looking at them, not verifying the authenticity, scratching out some names to protect privacy, but releasing all of the information that remained. That to me didn't make sense from a national security perspective through FOIA. Again, even though it was marked unclassified, it didn't matter. They didn't verify the authenticity. So how do they really know it's unclassified? So it really just didn't make sense. Again, removing myself from the story, from the outside looking in from that legal / FOIA side, it just didn't make sense. So why they did that, I don't know. But on top of that, it just got even like more confusing on, well, can you tell me if you just sent that fourth page, which sadly I never got the answer to, but I did get told it was legitimate, and that's fine. That's great. We know that now, but why it wasn't sent, I'm not really sure. So now that was last month. This month, this was the other piece of that story that I had to shelve, because I knew that I had this open FOIA request for specifically that AATIP tipped an email. So I only had to touch on it a little bit in April, and then now I finally got the response. I had to push. I had to keep following up. It's sometimes insane how long these things go. This was 2 pages. That's it. And I was waiting for almost 3 years for 2 pages. So that fact alone is insane. But what happened when they finally released it made everything even more weirder. So this is the FOIA response letter for those taking notes. This was the final response for 21F1154. This was me going after specifically that AATIP tipped an email. They located 2 pages, which were the email thread and an attachment. I'm going to read to you why they made the redactions they did. The redacted withheld information is exempt from release pursuant to 5 U.S.C. Section 552B5, inter and intra-agency memorandum, which are deliberative in nature. This exemption is appropriate for internal documents, which are part of the decision-making process and contain subjective evaluations, opinions, and recommendations. And B6, information which, if disclosed, would constitute a clearly unwarranted invasion of the personal privacy of individuals. Please note that we have considered the foreseeable harm standard when reviewing records and applying exemptions under FOIA in the processing of this request. I invite you to pause the video, watch or read all the other legal jargon, not important for the sake of this video. But here was that email. Now we get a little bit more of the thread, not much, but it was Elizondo's response of perfecto, also sent on October 3rd, the day he resigned, responding to Tipton saying, I'll get back to you today or tomorrow. Elizondo never noting, hey, by the way, I'm quitting today. So yeah, I won't be here. It was just great, thanks. And he was awaiting his response. So that was kind of an interesting but weird development, again, all the day he quit. But look down here. The most important email, the Pentagon decides to redact the line about AATIP. They redact it, so that's B5, which they consider a deliberative process. That doesn't make sense to me whatsoever, because it's not deliberative process for Elizondo to be making the claim, I'm taking the AATIP responsibilities and giving them to you. The B6 redaction here we know is Brennan's name. I get that. Even though Brennan's name is in the public sphere now, thanks to mainstream media, Politico to be exact, Why they're redacting it, I don't really know. But be that as it may, they redacted his name. Here's a comparison of the email that was from the complaint and the one they released. The exact redaction helps you better assume the new responsibilities for AATIP. I don't find that as a B5 redactable line. It's not deliberative. This was essentially, according to Elizondo, more of a fact that he was passing the reins to Tipton to take responsibility for AATIP. That's it. So I've fought this. And even though we know what it says, it's like, well, why are you fighting, John? Like, who really cares? It's because of this. The memo that was referenced in that email was entirely redacted under, it might be hard to see on your screen, but B5 and B6. So the privacy redaction, which those are admittedly very, very tough to argue, but rightfully so. I mean, they're protecting people's identity. So that's fine. But B5, not so much. In the FOIA world, a lot of times we call this the redacted if you want to exemption. And what essentially that means is if it doesn't fall into the other 8 exemption categories, essentially they will go ahead and use B5. And when they use B5, it's very hard to fight because you don't really know what you're fighting. You know, if it's B1 and it's national security, well, you know, you can sometimes create an argument for that. If it's various other exemptions, you can sometimes make an argument for that. But when it comes to B5, it's like, well, how do we know that it's deliberative in nature? You don't really know. So that's why they call it the B5 redacted if you want to exemption, because it is often fought about in the courts. It definitely needs work. It needs a revamp. It needs new language. So it is something that is a problem for us FOIA requesters. But you can see here that it was entirely withheld. So we don't know what this letter was that Luis Elizondo drafted. Now, where they may have some kind of legal argument, and this, look, it stinks. I hate even pointing this out, but in the interest of full transparency, they may fight back on my appeal and deny it, at least for that particular page, because if they consider it a draft documents are not technically subject to FOIA, but agencies can use their discretion to release documents that they consider draft if it's in the public interest and maybe will help with, let's say, transparency a little bit. So we know it's unclassified. Sure, redact some names if there's names, phone numbers, social security, bank account numbers, whatever that you want to consider personal information. I'm joking with the bank account numbers, but that's what you see on B6, and those are rightfully done so. But B5 on the whole thing, I don't see it. So I'm fighting it. We'll see what actually happens to get this. So those were the 2 pages that came up. Now, obviously, the reaction by the general public was, pretty wide ranging. And it's very interesting for me because obviously I report everything. I've done so for 27, 28 years now. I give everything out. But what's interesting to me is people's perception of FOIA, because when FOIA, and this isn't true for everybody, but for a lot of people and a lot of noisy people at that, and a lot of people are on my haters list, that if FOIA produces something that they don't like, right? All of a sudden, they absolutely hate me. They hate FOIA. They think it's useless. They think it's a tool. They believe, and this actually has gone on quite a bit in the last couple months, even though I've had the accusation for years. It's really ramped up in the last couple of months that I work for the U.S. government, that they orchestrate these releases through me, and then I put them out to the masses in some kind of disinformation campaign. I've been accused of collecting a paycheck from the U.S. government. It's just insane what the conspiracies are when FOIA produces something that they don't like. However, those same people, when something like this comes out, and an email, which, admittedly, some of them may not even know that it was published before, they come out and they see what I publish and they see the essential cover up. I mean, look, I'll call it that. I mean, I don't know why they're covering this up. I have no idea, but they see that and they go, aha, see, John, you owe Elizondo an apology. You need to do a mea culpa. You need to fall down to your knees and apologize to everybody. Why? All of a sudden, FOIA's like the gold standard. Does the same exact people that make an accusation that I'm like somehow working for the government. And for me, I can't help but laugh because it's that selective belief system that if FOIA produces something you don't like, then the guy that brought it to you is the devil. If FOIA produces something that you do like, then all of a sudden it's unchallengeable. Like this is black and white proof that Elizondo led AATIP. Now, look, I don't believe that this is vindication for anybody, any side of any part of the story. I'm sorry. And here's why I say it, because if you look at the actual emails and you look at the back and forth, even Neil Tipton himself had absolutely no idea what he was inheriting. He even says, thanks, Lou, all good. Although at some point, I need to know what this actually is, meaning he was confused. I won't read it all to you, but I invite you guys to do so. In these emails that I got between Elizondo and Neil Tipton, Elizondo was speaking incredibly highly of Neil Tipton, that he was the guy to inherit the reins of AATIP, that he was perfectly suited to do the job. So to see his name then, after you read these emails, wind up in the IG complaint, it was really bizarre because there was nothing that Tipton did as outlined in the complaint that I saw anyway, that showed that he was, doing this wrongdoing. But you look at the banter back and forth, and in fairness, this was in August, so a little bit prior to some of the latter banter that we've gone over in this video. He didn't even know what Luis Elizondo was essentially talking about. Like, what is really there? Like, what is it that you're trying to pass on? What is it that is with this program? Because these emails never mentioned AATIP at all. So I don't think that he was quite on board. And it wasn't until that later email in late September that the acronym AATIP popped up. And then Tipton said, okay, that he would look things over. So again, just very kind of bizarre when it came to this material, that it's not vindicated. Again, I go back to, well, are you going to apologize to everybody? It's not about that, because I don't know what it proves at this point, other than the Pentagon is being incredibly ridiculous with their redactions, and to have them do that. The question now is why? Why did they consider that deliberative in nature? There's got to be some kind of explanation for that, because this is already in the public sphere. It's already been out for 2024 now. I had to look at my calendar to figure out what year it was. I should sleep more, but it's 2024 now. It originally appeared in early 2020. You're talking about more than 4 years this is floated around, including the Department of Defense Inspector General getting it and a complaint to them. What is up with that? I really have zero answer for that. So again, it's not vindicating anybody at this point. It just means that whatever Luis Elizondo was doing with whatever he labeled as AATIP, he was passing it on to Neil Tipton. And somewhere between October 3rd and the point that Luis Elizondo submitted his IG complaint, Tipton did something bad. Like Tipton did something wrong. What that is, again, I wish that Mr. Elizondo, through his attorney, would have let me know, because I would have published that last month. But I've asked that question quite a bit over the years since the IG complaint came out. What do you do? I don't know. So it's bottom line, though, is it's incredibly interesting to see these emails. It's one piece to a much, much bigger puzzle that we are still trying to put together. I am so amazed at the amount of time that these take and the amount of trouble that it has been to get answers. And I know that people think that I pick on Luis Elizondo and target him. I mean, I'm here to tell you that when you look at the totality of the FOIA requests I've done on this topic, both sides of this, both sides have been equally as confusing and equally as responsible for muddying the waters. I don't know why that is. We should have this a little bit more clear, because here's yet more information that says, oh, this is all unclassified, right? That this is all things that essentially they can banter about in open channel. So that doesn't mean that they can just release it to the general public, but that means it should be accessible through FOIA much easier than it is. So on one hand, you have the Pentagon that is doing these silly redactions, in some cases top to bottom pages, saying, nope, sorry, even though it's unclassified, we can't give you a single word. And then on the other side, you have people that don't want to answer questions. And that's not just unique to Luis Elizondo, because there are some outstanding questions. There's quite a few actually to this day, but others that have come out in that particular group as well. So why is it that you can't get straight answers from either side? I really don't know, but I am happy to see some of my haters love FOIA, at least this month, this week, today. And we'll see when they come after me next, when FOIA may produce something they don't like. I don't really know. But regardless, I'll send it all to you. I will post everything. I do so in unedited raw form. And of course, in some occasions have articles attached, but you can always see those documents. With that, for those who are watching live, I am going to go ahead and hit some of those questions. If you're listening on the audio podcast version, just know that the YouTube channel sometimes will do these live streams where I'll record the segment live, and I will go ahead and take as many questions as I can. It's only on the YouTube channel and some of the other social media networks that I stream on where it's live. If you're listening to the podcast version, obviously those are all dropped pre-recorded. So to make sure you're subscribed, you get notified, with the notifications on for YouTube, just simply go to www.theblackvault.com/live. That will bounce you to the YouTube channel, and that will notify you when I go live and do these live streams, because it's always fun for me. So let's go ahead and start going to the chat. I'm going to be honest with you guys. There are over 1,400 people currently watching. So the chat on my side pulls in all the social media. I am going to do my best here on various questions, and we're going to try and keep it as topical as we can. Who knows, here as we're live, we'll probably veer off somewhere else. So let me just kind of take them as I see them. I know it's an internet faux pas. Put them in all caps. It really helps me. Any of the super chats that come in on YouTube, 100% of your donation does go to the Black Vault. I don't buy myself anything. Goes to server charges, FOIA request fees, stuff like that. Makes this channel possible. So if you do decide to do that, please know 100% of it goes right into the channel. And on top of that, those do stick out and get automatically starred on my end. So they do stick out a little bit easier for me to see. So not a ploy for you to use that feature, but if you decide to do it, just know that those will stick out. First one coming up, hides in long grass. Has the UFO caucus reached out to the Black Vault regarding Elizondo and Lakatsky's emails vanishing? That is a great question, and the answer is no. No one has reached out to me from the U.S. government to get anything. I'm always here if people want to kind of see what FOIA has uncovered. Again, I'll repeat, FOIA is never everything, but it is something that is incredibly helpful. It's a very helpful tool to peek behind the curtains, to see the internal banter, to see a lot of the emails, the communications back and forth, but really highlight the secrecy. And even though I'm a big fan, regardless of the side of the aisle that they sit on, a big fan of those politicians that want to get involved in this arena and really put their name out there and really try and get some transparency. I fully support that and encourage that. I wish more names were doing that. I really do feel sometimes when they chat, they're barely scratching the surface of this topic. And I think that maybe they get caught up in the headlines a little bit. I think they get caught up in the hype and hysteria a little bit, and they kind of put all their eggs into one particular basket, which may not be the best basket to put all your eggs in, because I think we're kind of seeing a few names fall off with the interest that they have had in the past, but maybe nowadays it's not as strong. And I think it's because they are putting, again, all those eggs into admittedly a very sexy basket, getting big headlines of of non-human intelligence, of bodies that crashed in these non-human intelligent pieces of technology. You get caught up in that. And then as time goes on and you really don't have anything, the congressionally mandated effort is trashing those particular claims. You start to see some names fall off a little bit. And I think we're seeing that. So whether it's true or not, I mean, again, I'll get hate mail for saying that, but it doesn't matter if it's true or not. They are not seeing the evidence. So the eggs that they put all in that basket are starting to fall out and crack, and the interest wanes a little bit. So sadly, we're seeing that. But to go back to your question, no, they haven't reached out to me, and I consider myself a no one, so I don't expect them to. But should they ever, I'm happy to talk to them. Not a problem whatsoever. I get a lot of questions on this. I did post this. Hello, John. Hi, Jackson. Call out Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick about Skinwalker Ranch meeting in 2018 with Brandon Fugel. Yes, and in fact, I did. This was something that was posted by Brandon on X. I felt it was fascinating. Kind of the quick backstory to this is that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick recently did an interview with Stephen Greenstreet and the New York Post. In that interview, it was asked of Dr. Kirkpatrick, did you attend a briefing in 2018 about Skinwalker Ranch and with Brandon Fugel, which stemmed back from a prior interview that Stephen Greenstreet did with Brandon Fugel. So it was kind of this progression of unraveling whether or not there was a briefing. And Sean Kirkpatrick actually admitted that he did go to a meeting / briefing. He was a little confused on the date, 2018, maybe more so 2017, according to him, and does not remember. I'm paraphrasing this, so I invite you to check out Stephen Greenstreet and the New York Post recent video, and I will post that in the show notes below so you guys have a link to it. But the answer, again, paraphrase, was doesn't remember Brandon Fugel, the date 2018, but then he kind of thought maybe it was 2017. Did not think it was about Skinwalker Ranch at all. So it was kind of like this, well, wait a minute, so who's telling the truth? And then Brandon fires back and says it was 2018 and posts on X a few photographs from this particular a briefing. And you see Brandon kind of in front of a PowerPoint presentation screen. And you see Sean Kirkpatrick, right, kind of what you would consider the front of the table on the one side, but like the first seat, and a bunch of papers in front of him and so on. And it was really interesting to see, just simply because even though Kirkpatrick didn't deny the meeting / briefing took place, like now all of a sudden we get a picture of it as if we were a fly on the wall. That kind of stuff is so cool to me because, yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle, you know? And so I posted it out there. And then, of course, as social media does, rumors start flying. Kirkpatrick lied, he this, he that. I mean, look, I don't, you're talking about 2018. You're talking about 6 years ago or so. I'm not here to defend him. I mean, Kirkpatrick can defend himself. I just didn't like jump all over and go, he lied. No, I just think he may not have cared. I mean, that is one possibility, because someone like him, I'm guessing, gone through a ton of meetings and briefings and met tons of people. So yeah, maybe he doesn't remember. Maybe he's lying. I don't know. There's an equal chance for both before I start getting clipped on social media and saying, he's defending Kirkpatrick. No, frankly, in this instance, I don't care. And here's why. I think that a lot of people are missing the bigger question. The bigger question is why in 2018 was Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, of all the scientists in all the land, why was he asked by the congressional staffers or this committee to come in and essentially oversee what was being said? What was it about him that led them to ask him? And then just so happens that years go by and he finds them himself at the helm of a UAP research effort within the Pentagon called Arrow. How did those cards fall? It's like everybody cares about him lying, or did he not, or was it 2018 or what, 2017? Look, interesting, cool, but I want to know why he above anyone else was asked. And I want to know how the chips laid the way they were to pave the way for him to go on to lead Arrow. To me, that's more fascinating to me. And by the posting of that picture, Brandon, and kudos to him, just added that much more to the story. That visual element was awesome. So again, is he lying? Look, it's a huge possibility. Does he not remember? Huge possibility. It doesn't, to me, it wasn't as blatant as some people felt it was. But to me, I'm fixated on the why question. Why was he there? And why did he go on to lead Arrow? Because remember, in other interviews, he's kind of said, I don't really didn't really have an interest in UFOs prior to this. And yet somebody called him to attend a 2018 briefing, whether it be on UAP or whether it be on Skinwalker Ranch or both. Look, you can argue those details. That's fine. But why? Why was he there? Why was he asked? And that to me was the more intriguing question. So hopefully we'll get some more answers. I did, just to add a little bit more, I have said quite a few times that I have never talked to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. That was true up until yesterday. So just to, in the interest of full transparency here, I did invite him to do an interview, and reach out to him to do that. And although I won't share private communications, it was respectfully declined. But the message was pleasant. It was not an abrupt no, go stick it. Wasn't anything like that. Pleasant, single exchange, but he denied. So that's a shame, because what I wanted to do was focus on questions that he had not been asked before. I think Stephen Greenstreet did a great job asking the questions that he did. I feel some of the interviewers in the past have had, very scattered, because they weren't all, mind-blowing questions to be asked, but scattered, interesting questions. So what I wanted to do was get 10, 15, 20 minutes of his time, and just focus in on a couple things. But sadly, and I understood with the reasoning he gave me, just respectfully declined. So setting the record straight there, in case it ever does come out, I did speak with him yesterday very, very briefly through a written exchange, single time. That's it. So yeah, it's a shame, but is what it is. So we'll see if anything else comes out of that briefing. I was super intrigued by it. Hopefully I'm not going to screw this chat up. Sparky Pilot, I appreciate your support of the show there. And then I was seeing Red Panda. I know I saw you pop up on my screen. I'm going to try and find that. Forgive me, because, I think I found it. Yes, Red Panda, good to see you here. Thanks, John. Can you elaborate on the FOIA response document you received related to MH370? Yes, great question. And in fact, I have a small update. So I had posted out yesterday, literally was in my car waiting for my son. And I generally, for the my normal day job, I do like daily drop-offs to UPS and USPS. So kind of have it all down to a science of going there time-wise. And this particular day, I ran into a post office guy I knew, so I was able to save 15 minutes off my day, and sit in the car and go through my mail that I picked up at my P.O. box. And whole reason I said that was I'm going through the mail, and usually they're kind of boring responses, in what they call interim or acknowledgement responses. And they're just, we got your request, here's your case number, we'll get back to you in like 300 years. So nothing exciting. So out popped this, very interesting response from the DoD. It was just an interim response, but it had this Privacy Act. Let me see if I can get it real quick. I know we're kind of live here, so it may be a little bit tricky. But I don't know if I can. I'll screw this up somehow. If you guys don't mind, we're live. I'll cut it out later. Hold on. Let me see what I can do. Hold on. See, these are the fun of the live shows. I can cut this out later. This is it, right? Okay, hold on. Almost there. Hold on. Trying to get it to pop up here. Give me 1 second. See, I told you raw videos are just that. Hold on, I'm almost done here. I have like 12,000 windows open trying to get this thing. Now it's just going to be so overrated that nobody's going to care. Come on. It would be better to illustrate. That's why I'm trying to pull this up here. Should be it. Make sure I'm not sharing any personal info. Okay. Here we go. All right. So I'm going to start that over because I'm going to clip it out. Just bear with me. 56. All right, so Red Panda Koala, thanks, John. Can you elaborate on the FOIA response document received related to MH370? Yeah, so I was had a couple of extra minutes in my car yesterday and opened the envelope from the DoD. Generally, you get very boring responses, essentially what they call interim responses. They essentially say, we got your case. We'll get back to you in 300 years. Here's your case number and so on. But this particular one had this on it before I got the response. Look, they don't usually send full color printouts, so that's what stuck out more than anything to me. But Privacy Act data cover sheet, documents enclosed are subject to the Privacy Act of 1974. Content shall not be disclosed, discussed, or shared with individuals unless they have direct need to know in the performance of their official duties. You can read the rest of it. It's on the on the screen there. But what was really bizarre is in the history of me filing requests, I've never seen this before, and the subject of it is MH370 and that whole crazy saga. And look, I'm here to tell you, I don't buy that whole conspiracy going around that the plane was zapped. I think the videos are fake. I know Ashton Forbes does not care for me too much. So look, it's just not something that I talk about. But a lot of people have asked me, hey, have you gone after documents? And look, despite my personal feelings on something, I'll go after anything, just simply because I always like to see what's there and see if I'm ever pleasantly surprised. Now, I don't think I'm going to get a declassified video of some top secret technology warping a plane out of the sky, but we'll see, what comes up. And it's been said that MH370 has been bantered about within Arrow, speaking to Ashton Forbes. And in fact, before I came on the air, somebody had told me Ashton was talking about me going after his communications with the DoD, and essentially what Arrow was doing with the MH370 case. And apparently he's being ghosted now. So I guess to me, I felt like there was a different tone there now that he knows somebody's going after the communications, because I thought, I don't follow everything, but from what I understood, he was talking with Arrow actively, and then it got circulated that I was going after records, and then all of a sudden he's saying he's getting ghosted. So I don't know too much about everything he says. So I'll let you guys figure out if he's got a change of tune there. But I did kind of find that a little bit funny. But we'll see what comes up, not only with the communications between him and Arrow, but what they do with it. And if anything, when it comes to MH370, and we'll kind of go from there. So back to this cover sheet, it was really bizarre to see this. And I made some phone calls and email and created some emails today saying, hey, what is this? Is this a change of policy now? Like, I didn't take this, and I think others did, to where I couldn't release FOIA documents, because that's just against the law. And it was kind of not something that I even considered. So I was kind of surprised to see others interpret it that way. But I think what happened was it was simply a mistake. And for whatever reason, they may use this cover sheet internally and sent it to me by mistake. So they told me it's not a change in policy or anything, and that in future requests I shouldn't see it. So go figure, of all the requests that I've done to the DoD, it had to be about one that's the most conspiratorial, I guess. So who knows? I don't really know. We'll chalk it up as a mistake for now. But again, I just want to stress, I never took it that you couldn't share the FOIA documents. But I thought that there was maybe a change in policy internally that allowed them to do this, so they protected personal privacy information even more. And the question mark was whether or not maybe a mistake had happened, that maybe inadvertently information went out that shouldn't. I can tell you from firsthand experience that has happened in the past. And I was proactive in redacting that. One instance off the top of my head that was, I guess, subject comparable to this was Christopher Mellon's personal information, including his cell phone number and email address. Email address, not as, you know, like, oh my God, how can you do this? But when you start talking about Christopher Mellon's cell phone, that's ridiculous, you know? So I was proactive and I redacted the whole thing. So mistakes absolutely happen. So I was curious, hey, has this become a much bigger problem and you guys have changed your way of doing things, or what it ultimately came down to as a mistake? They claim, I guess, it was a mistake. So hopefully that answered your question there, but interesting nonetheless, you know, because it is a cover sheet that it's clear what it means, but you don't generally see that a lot. Lou, I see you up here. Hold on one second. I haven't read this, so I'm reading it for the first time. John, is the reaction to the Skinwalker presentation from Kirkpatrick back to McCain's staffer with suggestions or warnings that could be really helpful to understand what Kirkpatrick was doing there? So I know that it was McCain's staffer that reached out to Brandon Fugel. I don't recall, but the way you're wording this, maybe Kirkpatrick said the same thing, that it was McCain's staffer, but I don't recall that off the top of my head. Suggestions or warnings? I really don't know. I mean, if I'm following the question correctly, I want to know why Kirkpatrick was there. Why was he called in? So let's just say it was about Skinwalker specifically, directly and solely. Let's say it was about UAP and Skinwalker was 10%. Doesn't sound like it according to Brandon, but you know, regardless, why was he there? Like, I really want to know that. I don't think that that's well enough established, because when you look at his LinkedIn CV and where he was, there's no reason really for him, again, out of all the people in all the land, to be pulled in by whether it be McCain's staff or whomever from this committee. Why him? And then why did the chips fall as they did for him to go to Arrow? So I don't know. I really don't. I wish I knew, but there we are. So yeah, I think we need to figure out why he was pulled in for us to really answer that question. But warnings, I really don't know. I wouldn't speculate on that. David M., what is your opinion on where UAPs are coming from? Dimensions, time, water, ET, all of the above? That's a loaded question, David. I really don't pretend to have the answer to that. Thanks for watching, though. This is looks like a comment from X, the X live stream. I don't know. I don't know. I'm the kind of person that needs to see to believe. So that from a personal standpoint would make me really pinpoint a different dimension or time, stuff like that. I will fully admit that's out of my wheelhouse of scientific knowledge and understanding. And I only laugh at that because I laugh at myself. You know, I just don't have these type of degrees that some of the other much smarter gentlemen than me and ladies as well have to talk about time travel and different dimensions and stuff like that. So that's kind of out for me. But the ET thing, look, I don't dismiss it. I don't. But in the same respect, I haven't seen anything to tell me, yes, it's alien. I've seen enough to keep pushing, and I've seen enough to be open to the possibility. But I am someone that needs that evidence. I am someone that needs more than what we're getting. The days of trust me, bro, should be done. And the stories and the storytelling that's gone on for decades. In the next couple of days, I'm going to post a former NASA, I think he was a mission controller and considered, you know, a whistleblower, and came out with stories very similar to David Grush, just in a different way. But Bob Exler, I believe is how you pronounce his name. And, I've been kind of going through, just for fun, archival purposes, old videos and interviews, not as well known as some of the other ones, especially this day and age, and just posting it out there. Not that it's gospel, but rather to kind of reinforce, we've been hearing these things for decades, these claims of alien bodies and non-human tech, just referred to it as different ways. So I'm open to it. I've always been open to people like David Grush being not only legitimate, but speaking the truth, that's fine. I'm open to it. I haven't dismissed it, but I just need more than the words. So I wish I had a more definitive answer for you, but that's where I'm at, even after all this time. I love this topic. It's one that I'll talk about for years and years to come, more so than I already have, but I just don't have the answers. Maybe that's what intrigues me so much, is that I can't figure it out. I'm a big, those mind puzzles, I love those. And I think that's just, again, this is a personal note, but I can't put them down until I figure it out. And these are all puzzles to me. And even when you talk about Luis Elizondo or David Grush or whatever, to me, some people define like digging into their stories as being personal and that it's an insult to them. I've never been in that mindset. It's not personal. It's a puzzle. And that's why I focus on their stories, because it's a puzzle to me. Luis Elizondo's background and some of the stuff he did, even away from AATIP, that's a very intriguing puzzle that again, many people focus on his UFO stuff. I'm really interested in the NPSMS stuff and the Guantanamo Bay and some of the special access program work that he was doing. That's very intriguing to me. The David Grush angle, that's super intriguing to me because it's a giant puzzle. How do all these pieces fit together? And I don't know. So to me, it's just not personal. It's a puzzle. And that's why I can't answer your question definitively. I wish I could, but sadly cannot. So let me kind of go through some of these. And this is where I slow down a little bit. So I'm sorry. It's just trying to figure out the questions that are coming in. Zach Baker, I'd love to get your thoughts on Dr. Greer releasing DPI archive website. How legitimate is Dr. Greer as a source? Great question, and very much worth a mention that Dr. Greer has launched this website that, archives a ton of data. And look, any open access to information to me is valuable. So I commend that effort. I'm glad that at this point there was a registration process required. However, there was no paywall. So as somebody who's a big advocate for transparency and as somebody who doesn't believe in charging for that information, I was very happy to see that. So my kudos to him. When it comes to the legitimacy of Dr. Greer, there's a lot of issues that I have with claims over the years. Recently I posted how much he charges to go out and learn how to communicate with aliens. Now, that could very well be a skill set that is something he's mastered. But let's just assume for a moment that that's true, that he actually has mastered that ability to go out and channel aliens, communicate with aliens, bring them down. Let's just assume for a moment that that is all legitimate. Why is that something that you should charge humanity for? Because I believe that if you cross that line and you are able to do that, the only reason you charge for it is because you have money as your motivator. And if you have money as your motivator, what is it that you really are trying to do? So I don't believe that he has mastered that ability. And with that, I believe that these big price tags that stretch into thousands of dollars to just go see him, hear him tell you how to communicate with aliens, that to me, I have a big issue with. I really do. If you can do that, then you will make an insane amount of money. If you could provably do that, an insane amount of money by mastering it and creating a book telling others how to do it. And in that regard, I would be a little bit more supportive because I don't think there's anything wrong with a book because it makes it accessible to the general public and it makes it affordable to the general public. And I do believe that people should be compensated for their work and time. So I am not one that has bashed people for books. I've bashed in the marketing efforts sometimes for commercial products, but not that. So it would be a little bit more palatable for me that if he wanted to have a little bit of financial motivation, fine, but make it affordable and make it available to the masses. But instead, you have to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to go, if not thousands of dollars, to actually meet him for the meet and greet. I mean, it's like, huge price tags to go to a winery and see this. I have a problem with that. That to me is huge red flag number 1 through 300, because it just shouldn't be that way when you're talking about humanity altering information. So that being said, when it comes to that legitimacy, those are the things that define the legitimacy of someone for me personally. That doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing, but you have to look at those motivating factors for him, what he is trying to claim, and how after all these years, I have yet to see someone come out and go, oh my gosh, I spent X amount of dollars. I went on a camping trip. We went out into the wilderness and I learned how to channel or communicate with or bring down non-human intelligence or aliens or extraterrestrials or whatever you want to refer to it as. So I think that unless that happens and I see that, I'm going to be on that fence going, he probably hasn't mastered it. I don't think it's worth a couple $1,000s or whatever the price tag is right now to go see him do it. And that makes me question other motives as well. So I'm glad that information is open, but in the same respect now, with all that said about what he's looking for and what his motivating factors are, you look at that information, how can we trust it? I know that there's, I haven't gone through all of it, obviously. It's still fairly brand new, but there's a lot of information there that's redacted. I remembered, I'll kind of end the answer with this quick story, but years ago, I was asked by UFO Magazine, who I was writing for at the time, to essentially write an expose on the Disclosure Project. Now that dates this, I think that was around 2001-ish, I think it was, or if memory serves. But I mean, we're talking about like 20 years ago. And I bring it up for twofold reasoning. Number one, me dissecting and critiquing claims of individuals is nothing new. Some people, again, think it's very personal against whistleblowers and David Grush and Luis Elizondo. I've been doing it for decades, and that's all in writing. And the second reason why I want to bring it up is looking into the Disclosure Project and seeing, I think it was Neil Armstrong at the time, seeing witnesses that were being name dropped. But I reached out and started trying to figure out like who really was a witness. And the one that really did stick out was Edgar Mitchell. And I remember at the time, Edgar Mitchell was very upset being named as the witness that Dr. Greer was claiming. And again, I don't remember the exact debacle because I'm going back 20 plus years. But regardless, Mitchell was very upset. And I had reached out to Greer at that time for comment on this article, and he never wrote back. At the time, I don't know if he still does, but at the time there was a phone number to call. I went ahead and tried to call it, no return. Well, he was speaking in my vicinity in Southern California. So I sat through his lecture, and there's one thing I will always say about Dr. Greer. He's a brilliant speaker. I mean, he's very eloquent. He brings in a crowd. Not only physically, that he always gets big numbers, but I'm talking about like brings them into his story. Like he's very good at capturing that. So I was noticing that. But in the same regard, it was like, again, these names were being dropped and so on. So it doesn't matter how eloquent you are. If you're not factual, you've got a little bit of an issue. So I was going to leave well enough alone. I just wanted to do my due diligence, see what he had to say, and hear it all. And finally, there was a Q&A section, and there were a couple that knew the article I was writing. They said, go up there, go up there. And I said, no, look, I don't want any confrontation. If he doesn't want to get back to me, it's pretty clear I want to get back to him, or excuse me, I want to hear back from him. But if he doesn't want to get back to me, it is what it is. So he said something that just kind of made me click and go, nope, now's the time to go up to that microphone and ask. So I'm waiting in line and I get up there, and I remember all this is captured on camera. And I believe it was around 2000, 2001, Orange County, California. I want to dig up at the time, it was VHS. but dig this up, because about time for me to go to the mic, I remember Dr. Greer saying, no, we're done with questions. And I was the next one. I was like literally stepping up to the mic, and I just started asking the question. And essentially I asked, talking about the witnesses and the vetting of the witnesses, and, you know, what process there was for that. But essentially, how does he respond to someone like Edgar Mitchell, who was upset being named? And I kind of no sooner got it out, and he kind of interrupted me, and essentially said that he was able to vet witnesses, and that they did their due diligence. And again, this is going back about 20 years. So I'm kind of paraphrasing, but what did really stick out was he was very kind of put off by the question, and then essentially said, like, you would find anything being a kid sitting on a computer. And I laughed at it in the room, and I laugh at it, you know, 20 plus years later now, near 25 years later. I laugh at that because it's like, well, that has nothing to do with anything, but you were obviously hurt over the question that I was asking. And he got his insult out, and he says, we're done. And he literally just walked off stage, and that was it. Like he abruptly ended, and all because I questioned, you know, the vetting process. So that, to me, what I said was a short story turned into a longer one, but details matter in that, and context matters. That always has bothered me, that he didn't want you to question the vetting of witnesses and his process on top of, if somebody came out and said, hey, my name's being dropped, I don't necessarily like that. He goes, I really don't care. And didn't want me asking the question. So it is unfortunate that happened. And for the past 20, now near 25 years, that stuck with me. And it stuck with a lot of people. I still get periodic messages from people that were in that crowd, because at the time, conferences were a lot more popular. And Orange County always drew, you know, 1,500 people, I think, 2,000. So I know that's not an extraordinary crowd, but for a UFO conference, that's pretty big. So there were a lot of people in the room, and a lot of people saw that reaction, and it's resonated with a lot of people. So that has stuck with me, to go to your legitimacy part of your question, that I take most everything with a grain of salt, which comes from Dr. Greer. So no offense to him, but he earned that grain of salt, if you ask me. The wub, thank you for the support of that. Thank you for the support here on the YouTube channel. Going through here, I see I'm well behind, 12:29. Yeah, I'm about 20 minutes behind, so bear with me here. Drew Williamson, John, who do you think also, oh, I'm sorry, who do you think asked Kirkpatrick to sit in the 2018 meeting? I don't know, Drew. That's a great question. I know one of the previous questions that was posed made it seem like possibly it was part of McCain's office, but that may be conflating Brandon Bugel's invitation versus Kirkpatrick, or maybe the same staff invited both. So I don't know, nor do I think it was said. So apparently that second question, let me see if I could find it, Lou. So Lou Review says, read the second question. He says he was driving. Lou, I usually listen to you while I'm driving as well, so it's not a problem. Let me see if I can go back. John, is the reaction to the Skinwalker presentation from Kirkpatrick back to McCain's staffer with suggestions or warnings FOIA-able? Gotcha. It could be really helpful to understand why Kirkpatrick was there. Now I get it, Lou. Thanks for posting that. No problem. Now it makes sense. No. So it would not be FOIA-able if everything was on the congressional side. What I am working on is the Kirkpatrick side of where he was, essentially when he was asked to do this. So that's kind of TBD. I'm not teasing anything because I don't know where that's going to end up. You're obviously talking about 6+ years ago. So if there were government systems that he was using at that time, which may or may not be true, again, this is still kind of unfolding. Yes, it potentially could be FOIA-able, but have they hung on to his emails? And that gets into the records retention schedule issue that I've spoken a lot about. So with that passage of time, that may hurt us trying to get some kind of an answer. We'll see. I don't know. But thanks for clarifying. And I'm sorry, as you know, with these live streams, it's hard to follow all your questions. I know you're doing them all the time, and it's old hat to you, but it's hard to follow all these. So yeah, not FOIA-able unless Kirkpatrick was in a facility that it was government and or military that I could get it, but even that might be a challenge. Sean Kirkpatrick, incredible Wahoo. Sean Kirkpatrick and McKernan, High IC, meet with Fugel, Putoff, Green, etc. at Kirk McConnell. Request 419. Is this FOIA-able? Yeah, I've heard the name Kirk McConnell. I know that he was reaching out to quite a few different people. I think it was Robert Salas, if memory serves, that posted his name on social media years ago. But so I'm not sure if it was him specifically. May have been that is likely the truth. But regardless, if it's true, it would not be FOIA-able. So Congress, the Senate, they are not subject to FOIA whatsoever. Again, the receiving end would be. So if I can, really understand the receiving end, we'll see if that can work. So let me get some more questions here. Nick D has the Black Vault sent any FOIA request for the guy that lives next to Area 51 with the Dreamland website? Yes. Great question. George Knapp just recently mentioned some documents I got from the Public Affairs Office that was about that raid and so on, and how the Public Affairs Office was kind of caught blind on it. I do have some other stuff as well that I've been kind of going after and seeing what's available. So yeah, sadly, it just takes a little bit of time, but I've gone after it. I was really intrigued by that story, and we'll see what comes up of it. Drew Williamson. Oh no, not Exler. Yeah. And the whole point being, these claims are nothing new. And I know that he's just not as well known to everybody, but it sounds like you know him. But these UFO whistleblowers, they've been around for a long time. And I think that that's why it's interesting to look at those videos, because those that came like from the 2017 hysteria on, they don't know any better. And that's not meant to be demeaning. But if they don't take the time to actually look backwards and look at what we have as a UFO community learned for decades, even longer than I've been alive, what we have learned and what we can piece together, a lot of people just take what they've learned from 2017 on. They think ufology started with the Nimitz, then somehow like skipped all the way to 2017. And that's all the ufology that they know. So no, me posting this video is not that I think that that's what you're getting at, but it's not any endorsement of Exler whatsoever, but rather showing these claims, these extravagant claims have been around for decades. And the day of the trust me bro should be over. I mean, I can't say that enough. The stories have long been around of these exact same claims. Grush included. When you look at what Grush has said, even though he went through the DOPSR process, which by the way, we still have not seen his DOPSR request, regardless, he goes through the DOPSR process and he gets approved with what he's about to say. And everybody just flips out. How? Oh my goodness, this is huge. Well, he didn't really say anything that we haven't known for years. Alien bodies, crash retrieval, this, that, and the other thing. And I say, when I know, when we know for years, it's people have had these stories. But it's like, where are they rooted to? And now we're starting to get an idea of where they're rooted to. Dr. Eric Davis was one of those 40 that was talking to David Grush. So now we know, I'm sorry, but there's some questionable stuff that have come out from Eric Davis. I've posted provably factually incorrect information when Eric Davis has posted on social media attacking me. Surprise. He doesn't like me very much, but some of the stuff he said was blatantly wrong. And when you look at that and it's like, well, he's entrenched with the same select few people that I think is the same select few people that Dr. Kirkpatrick has referenced. So love him or hate him, Kirkpatrick talked about a select few people. And you can take Kirkpatrick out of the picture, look at that one single claim, and see the reality behind it, that you have the Hal Puthoff and Dr. Kit Greens and so on in this core group that have been around for decades. And we now are starting to learn that that's who David Grush was talking to when it came to Eric Davis being one of the 40. Now I saw a post that Jason Sands is saying that he was one of the people that fed Grush information. Is that true? I don't know. I mean, until Grush says it, I'm not going to start, screaming to the heavens saying, aha, Jason Sands is a crazy new whistleblower that has absolutely nothing to back up his claims, was one of Grush's sources. I'm not going to say that, but it sure doesn't look good if that's who he's been talking to. So hopefully that'll be addressed a little bit more in the future. So that's my whole point in talking about these quote unquote whistleblowers that have come out in the past. They bring with them nothing. And I think it's important for people to see that. I really do. Aaron Dunn, in the event these SAPs are covered under nuclear secrets, is there a way through FOIA to get at them? Well, it depends on what type of SAPs you're talking about. It depends on what time frame you're talking about, and what depends on exactly what are the SAPs. So there have been in the past these highly classified special access programs that have come out over the years. They don't prove aliens, but more so my point is, yes, you can essentially FOIA these types of SAPs, but they don't come out for years. They are sometimes heavily redacted, and you need to know where to look. And that's kind of a downfall to FOIA, is if you don't somewhat have an idea of where to look, it's kind of, you're shooting in the dark trying to find something. So it's a tough question to answer because there's a lot of variables there. When you're likely referring to these extraterrestrial vehicle recovery type of SAPs, if they exist, those are going to be some of the most highly classified programs that exist. So that's where I come from with my skepticism, where is FOIA going to be able to bring that out? Likely not. Will they lie, or will the FOIA office be able to access it, but be denied to release it? Probably not. It's the same reason why I think Arrow wouldn't have access to everything. Nobody listens to me when I say that. They just think that I say FOIA touches everything. I've never said that. So when you talk about crash retrieval programs and SAPs like that, should they exist, would be some of the most highly classified material that's out there. I mean, that's just how this works. I mean, you're talking about all humanity altering information that touches on a topic that we already know, minus the alien stuff, is one of the more highly classified pieces of information that the government has. They hide it very, very well. That's all provable through FOIA. Alien or not, the UAP topic is something that they just do not want to talk about. So I don't think that FOIA would just like break down the walls of secrecy and reveal alien tech through these SAPs if I requested it. So I have to preface it with that. But if you're talking about other stuff, yes, SAPs have been absolutely FOIA-able. They've come out, been declassified, and FOIA has brought out some amazing pieces of history that were once highly, highly, highly classified. So I know I'm all over the place with that answer, but it sadly, it's an all over the place type of answer. It's just, it depends on exactly what you're talking about. But to close that thought, that is the root of my skepticism, because it would be so highly classified for David Grush to just hear what he did from 40 people, even though he was highly cleared. You're talking about very highly compartmentalized programs. Again, assuming all of that is true, extraterrestrial crash recovery, all that kind of stuff would be highly compartmentalized. I don't think there's any other way to look at it. So let's just say that David Grush was able to somehow convince X amount of people to come tell him that. And he takes those pieces of knowledge and summarizes them and then takes them to the Department of Defense through the DOPSR process. And somehow, like, DOPSR just somehow lets it clear through, like, what, the CIA, the DIA, how many people did they talk to with this? We don't really know. We could get a better idea if we saw what was reviewed, but David Grush actually will not release it. Still don't know why. So if we had some kind of idea of who DOPSR talked to, we could get an idea of where this kind of stretched to, but we don't have any of that. I do not believe that if those highly classified programs exist in the way that we've been told, that it would fly through the DOPSR process and go, yeah, no problem. You can talk about it. You can summarize it. I don't see that happening at all. And this whole catch-22, I've talked about it a lot, but I'll, for the sake of this answer, say it again. The catch-22 scenario that David Grush put forward, which I respectfully disagree with, I don't believe it holds water at all. But his theory is that if Dopser says, no, you can't talk about that, then he would either be forced with redacting those particular sections, or rephrasing what he wanted. He said that essentially he would just publish the redactions, and the catch-22 would be that the Department of Defense would corner themselves in admitting that all of the non-human intelligence and crash retrieval and stuff was legitimate and real. But that doesn't make any sense. That's not how secrecy or redactions work. If Dopser came back to him and said, whoa, we got pushback from the CIA, or we got pushback from DoD, or wherever, and they said, you can't talk about all of this, they don't redact one word or two words, and then the general public can kind of piece it together, and there's your catch-22. It doesn't work that way. In fact, in this very video, I showed you, they'll redact the whole darn page. If it behooves them to cover something up and do so in totality, they will. So that catch-22 thing doesn't make sense. And then on top of that, let's just say they redacted enough of it to reduce the context to the point of not being able to figure it out. David Grush would be legally liable if he goes out and starts hinting at it and starts, like, playing the word game and dropping breadcrumbs. You're playing with fire if you do something like that. So that catch-22 scenario does not make sense to me whatsoever, which again roots my skepticism on him being able to talk about this. Bottom line, though, is where the heck is that Dopser review? There's not enough people asking that question of where it is, and that's a shame. I'm looking at the name here, European Techie. European Techie. Sorry. Took me a second there. European Techie. Have you ever FOIA'd anything about Bledsoe talking about channeling? So when it comes to the story of Christopher Bledsoe, let me look in my database here. I can't share the screen simply because this is my own internal database. So I don't think I've done anything on him specific. Let me search one more way. But I will say I tried, and when I wanted to and tried was there was a lot of claims going around that NASA was investigating him, so on and so forth. So you can't just go to NASA headquarters with a FOIA request and say, give me everything on Christopher Bledsoe, because they'll reject it. It's just way too broad. NASA has a lot of different components. So I believe I'd have to look back. This is going back quite a few years when Bledsoe was kind of at the peak of his popularity. And a lot of more people were talking about his cases. Who in NASA? Like, what are you talking about? You can't just say NASA, you're not talking about just the director. Who are you talking about? And I remember asking, and I think it was on Facebook, because I don't think the dad, Christopher Bledsoe, used the X or Twitter at the time or anything else other than Facebook. And I remember asking, and it was just, there was no information given whatsoever. And then his son largely took over talking on social media and making these claims about NASA. But to me, those are silly claims. Like NASA as an organization doesn't look into the ET UFO channeling of one person. Now, if you tell me I'm making this up, but like Goddard Space Flight Center or some component of NASA, I can work with that, but I can't work with it just like NASA as a whole. How many employees does NASA have? So I think those are silly claims to make unless he wants to back it up. Of course, the son didn't like being questioned and thought I was part of the cover up. He made that accusation that I was there to essentially cover up Chris Bledsoe's videos and stuff like that. And the overall case doesn't really impress me much. The one that did it in for me was the SpaceX launch. And he had such an amazing video because it was super cool. It was the SpaceX launch. And I'll give you the rundown without audio. The SpaceX launch, and then he catches like this meteorite that comes screaming through the atmosphere. And it was killer. Super killer. Like, it was like you get the launch, you get the meteor coming through. Super cool. Now add in the audio. He was thanking Jesus for the encounter with the SpaceX thing. thanking the Lord. He was talking to somebody, invoking somebody's daughter that passed away, and that this was a sign. And then when the meteorite comes in, just audio wise lights up in this video, and you can hear his voice, and he just thinks it's, essentially a sign from the heavens, and oh, thank you, Lord. And you hear it, and it was very uncomfortable because it's clearly a rocket launch. I live in the flight path of rockets that come out of Vandenberg. They constantly go over us. I know what a rocket looks like. So not only that, it was proven to be SpaceX, and later he retracted it. But my entire point is, like, it was so uncomfortable to hear him on the phone with somebody invoking somebody's dead daughter who had passed away, and like saying that this was a sign and using that. It did not sit well with me at all. So it's a shame. That video is out there. You can find the video. I've posted it on X to kind of prove the point. Like, look, this is overboard on how you're reacting to these things. So definitely a shame to see that. Is it FOIA-able? Sure. Give me, like the MH370 stuff. Give me something to work with. I now have something to work with. Arrow, talk to Ashton Forbes. That's all I need. And I can build off of that. When it comes to Bledsoe, you don't have it. Jazz Shaw, my buddy Jazz. Jazz, it's good to see you. For those who don't know, I was recently on a panel discussion with Jazz on the Jim Peters show. We had a lot of fun, Jazz and I speaking with Jim. So if you haven't seen that, that was a lot of fun. That dropped in the last week. I'm sure Jazz posted the link. I think Jim emailed it to me. I'll have to look it up and post it myself. I'm a little behind in that. But Jazz, didn't finish work soon enough for the start, but I'll catch up tonight. Keep up the good work, John. Jazz, thank you for that. I truly appreciate your support of the channel and your friendship and great conversation with you. So thank you. Thank you for that. Truly appreciated. I'm getting caught up here, guys. I know that there's other chats, and I just don't want to skip these questions. I've got a little bit of time. I'm late, but now that Lou unblocked you, did you have a chat with Lou, or are you planning to? Android Paranormal. Thanks for the question. Yeah, no, there was no conversation. This just happened in the last, I don't know when he did it, but I started seeing pop-ups of responses because I was tagged in a couple posts, which I don't generally see. And his name popped up, and it was clear I was unblocked. So, hey, I respect that. We obviously don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. We've had some rough spots over the years. From a personal front, I don't have any problems with Luis Elizondo. Has he said some stuff about me that I didn't care for? Yes, absolutely. Is he a fan of everything that I've said? I'm guessing not. So look, I'm not here to burn bridges and have enemies. I can play nice in the sandbox and tip my hat to those that will do the same. So I hope moving forward, I do have more conversations with him. I had posted that as kind of like a literal hat tip, and he had a great response back. And again, just animated GIFs. That's all it was. That was, I hope, a sign. People started reading into it and thought that he was like trying to have a shootout at the OK Corral with me. I didn't take that at all. I had put out the hat tip that Sam Elliott did in Tombstone, one of my favorite memes to use, just as a sign of respect. I love Sam Elliott as an actor. I think he's an awesome human being. And then the response by Mr. Elizondo was Val Kilmer in his brilliant performance in Tombstone, winking. It was like a perfect response. Very cool. Just a hat tip, from myself to be met with that was cool. So look, water under the bridge for uncomfortable things that have been said in the past. Because again, there's things on both sides that I'm sure we can sit here and talk about for hours, but I hope that this is a sign from both of us that we're on the same team. We may not agree, but I think that we're big boys. We can play nice and chat without, I like his attorney a lot, actually. I get along with him fine, despite the legal threats from now and then, but have no problem with him. I think he's a great guy, but I would love to speak with him as well again. I think we had some great conversations, both privately and publicly. And I think that we can do a lot more together than we can apart. So water under the bridge, man. It's not about burning bridges and having enemies in this conversation. let's just move forward and get to the truth, whatever the hell it may be, because as we see, it's pretty hard to come by. Okay, so we answered that one. Sorry, this is again a live show, so I'm just kind of going through the questions here. There's a lot of banter. I'm very surprised. There are 2,139 of you watching as I say that through the 3 networks that are watching right now. So thank you for that. Aaron Desario, Aaron, thank you so much for being here. John, you have way too much faith in Dopser getting told about a deeply hidden SAP, something that would be dumb if I were running that SAP. So Aaron, great comment. And this is something that I know is being debated by a lot of people. Where I respectfully disagree on whether or not Dopser would be told that is they are, number one, cleared at a top secret level. Number two, that is what they are there for. Again, that catch-22 scenario that Grush has put forward, it relies on one very important thing that I think a lot of people fail to remember. And it relies on the redactions leaving enough context for us to figure it out. That's not how redactions work, not within Dopser, not within national security issues, not with proactive releases by the government, and not through FOIA. Just doesn't work that way. You have to redact enough to remove the context. And if that stipulates that they have to redact the whole darn thing, they will. And if they have to redact the whole darn thing and say, Grush, you can't release a word of that, then he needs to oblige that request. He's got a security oath, as we've all heard. He takes that very seriously, and I don't fault him for that, not at all. So you have to remember that when dealing with Dopser. Dopser's not some rinky-dink arm of the DoD that pushes paper now and then. They've been around for decades, and again, their whole responsibility is to ensure that no classified information spills into the open, whether it be through manuscripts, books, TV shows, fictionalized scripts, doesn't matter. So yes, I do believe and have some faith, if you want to call it that, but I do believe that they, to a point, would absolutely be told no. They don't need to be told explanations of, well, because you can't talk about Project X, because from 1950 to 1980, XYZ happened and we have aliens. They don't need to be told any of that. They're cleared at a top secret level. They take that information, they clear it with whatever agency they have to or agencies. And if they are told, no, this chunk is not cleared per CIA directive XYZ, per FOIA exemption 1, 2, whatever, it doesn't matter. They don't need to be read into a SAP in order for them to be told no. All the agency has to do from the side that is cleared, they go back to Dopser and say, no, it's not cleared from our angle. And they can say in toto, the entire thing. That's it. So I think that a lot of people, again, this is where I respectfully disagree, Aaron, but love the question, is that's what people forget. And that's what is relied on for that catch-22 that just won't happen. I just don't see it in the way that he structured it. Aaron, again, thank you for that. John, have you? Same comment. Okay, no problem. I appreciate you, Aaron, with the support of the channel. Doing that would be really stupid if you want to hide something, and national security would allow you to avoid it. So I see you added there that national security would allow you to avoid it. Keep in mind, just to pen this to my answer as well, it's the national security process that would not require Dopser to be read in at all. And that's where the catch-22 scenario falls apart, is that they do not have to be read in. They don't need an answer. Now, would a whistleblower come out from Dopser and go, hey, this guy came to me with non-human tech claims. We tried to clear it for him. We were denied. Would that happen? Sure, maybe. But then you're talking about some legal repercussions, very similar to Snowden, Manning, so on and so forth. So you wouldn't have that happen. In a likely scenario. Of course it could, but national security safeguards are there for a reason. And for that catch-22 scenario to work, you need a lot of those safeguards to fall apart. And I just don't believe they would. I also have put the call out there, and this isn't directed at you, Aaron, but just more generally speaking, put the call out there that if there's any example of DOPSR in a situation, any situation similar to this, that allowed classified information out there, or that messed up, or anything like that, to show the ineptness of DOPSR, I'd love to see it, because those things can be found. I mean, look, they've been existed for decades. You would think that somebody would have some kind of citation that they could fall back on and go, well, look, you know, this has happened before. No one's been able to provide that. So again, until I see otherwise, that catch-22 just doesn't work. And that's why my skepticism is there. I'd love for him to address that directly. And I've tried with David Grush, but no. And I'm not looking for, again, a war with anybody, but rather respectful dialogue of just to address it and let me know. John Rochell, David Grush was a deliberate plant in my eyes to test the water. He has never wanted to or avoids being able to prove his WB whistleblower claims. Yeah, I don't know if the plant is what I would fall back on. The one thing that strikes me about David Grush is that he's very genuine. I do believe that what he conveys is the truth as what he believes it to be. What proof beyond what people told him is there? I have yet to see that. So I don't think that he is a plant per se, unless he's an unwilling one. I don't get the whole, like, he's here to strategically screw all this up and shape the DoD narrative here for the general public. But rather, I think that he is done through very genuine motivations, something that he feels is right. And that is taking what he learned from those 40 people and conveyed what he could to the general public. Now, that doesn't automatically mean it's true, but in my mind, it means he's genuine. I've seen other players out there that I don't believe are genuine. David Grush doesn't strike me as one that fits that category. He never has. I've never said that. On the contrary, seems genuine. But who are the 40 people? And the other question that I've never seen addressed, nor have I even seen it asked, is how many of the 40, and I hear maybe rumors it's above 40 now that people have talked to him, but let's just say that core 40, how many confirmed to him with firsthand knowledge about NHI? How many confirmed of those 40s about NHI crashed spacecraft or retrieval of some kind of debris? Was it 1 or 2? And like 38 kind of third hand supported it? Was it 10 or 12, 35, all 40? I haven't seen that. So if anybody has, please, I'll correct myself. But I don't think that that's out there. So we don't know who these 40 are, number one. But number two, we don't know how many of them gave the supporting evidence, if any, to the grandiose claims of David Grush. We just don't know. Love to see it, though. John as well. Carry on calling the fakes out. John, top show, top man. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I know that it's not popular at all to call some of this out. It's just not, you know, but it is what it is. I think that's the best approach. I really do. I think you hold all sides accountable, and that's what we have to do. I'm starting to get caught up though. I'm close. I'm like 3 minutes behind, I think, of the, no, scratch that. Looks like I'm caught up. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to put them in all caps, and I will try and get to them before we end. But, you know, great questions all around. I always enjoy doing this. I'm sorry I don't do it more. But thank you for that. And thank you for tuning in, and thank you for watching the whole ride. With that said, I think I'll go ahead and end the video, and then, oh, okay. Hold on, Aaron. You missed my second question. I probably did. Do you want to post it real fast? And I'm happy to get it. That's the problem with these. Like, there's still 2,227 people watching. So my window's flying at this point. But if you want to paste it again, please let me know. Oh, wait. See, here we go. See, it's going so fast. I can't even click on the right one. Aaron, John, would DOPSR have been told about the Manhattan Project had it existed then? Well, that's the thing. That's a great question. I mean, it involves a lot of speculation because during the Manhattan Project, Dopser itself obviously didn't exist. But on top of that, if someone, I mean, really think about this. If somebody said to whomever superior at the DoD that was cleared to hear it, I want a rough overview what the Manhattan Project is, and talk about a weapon in whatever phrasing of the time would make sense, a weapon of mass destruction that would be more than the world has ever seen ever before. So not talking about nuclear explosion, not talking about Manhattan Project, not even talking about the scientists that were there, but just talking about the development of it, right? So you broad stroke it in a very similar sense that we've had the broad stroke here. In my opinion, the answer would be no way, no how would that fly. Ever. They would never say, all right, well, as long as you kind of keep it broad stroked, we'll go ahead and let you do it. No. So Dopser or not, I do not believe that would ever fly. If an arm like Dopser existed with what I just said, I do believe that they would go to Dopser and say, no, that person cannot summarize a potential high weapon of mass destruction program and development of something that goes boom. I don't see it. I don't think that they would just go, oh, don't tell Dopser, let them go ahead and put that out there in the world, but don't tell them. I don't see it. So with respect, I think that reinforces the point more that I do not believe that they would allow a broad stroke overview of the Manhattan Project at that time. Speculating if Dopser existed, they wouldn't either. I think that Dopser would be told, no, you can't do it. And none of that would be approved and it would be squashed. So yeah, I do believe that. And the proof of that, because I always say, is there something you can fall back on? Yes. In the video that I did about Dopser, cited multiple manuscripts that had redactions, and the publishing companies opted to just publish the redactions. That they are able to do that, but you can see it's not one or two words. They are literal blacked out paragraphs, and I think one of the books I showed pages of what was sent to Dopser for approval. Dopser comes back and says, no, you can't talk about any of this. So that context is fully stripped to ensure that the general public cannot just kind of piece it together and figure it out. So there are multiple instances of that I think support that theory as well. That if Dopser sees something that's classified or encroaches on classified territory, they won't let it fly. Okay, Aaron, I promised you, I think that this is the right one because now I'm already quite a bit behind. Are there any mechanisms that are aware of that would allow the government to fabricate FOIA responses? Also a great question. No. So I've never seen any type of proof that they can or that they have. Now, if they can, would they tell you? Probably not, I guess. But I think that with FOIA passing in the late 1960s, was it? In the decades that it's been around, I am not aware, and anybody can correct me, please, of any type of situation where documents were manufactured and fabricated. Lies, yes. Fabricated documents, no. So maybe I'm just forgetting about something. So again, I'm open to having somebody tell me. So I think we have to differentiate between the two. Fabricate those. If by FOIA responses you mean like a response, a pile of documents, albeit short or fat, and have them be fabricated and hoax documents. I'm not aware of a single instance in the years and decades that FOIA has been around where that has happened. Have I personally experienced FOIA responses that were untrue? The answer is yes. I mean, just one off the top of my head was years ago, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base told me that they had no UFO records, and that information on Project Blue Book, Sign, and Grudge was all transferred to the National Archives. I have that in writing. I read like a year or two later, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base released about 1,000 pages of Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book, a UFO material. And I read that actually in UFO magazine. This was, 20 plus years ago. And I thought, well, wait a minute. And the guy that announced it, that was quoted in the article, was the same guy that signed the letter that said we had nothing. Was that a lie? Was it a mistake? I don't really know. I took it as a lie. They just didn't want to give it to me. But eventually those documents kind of came out. So I think that those I wouldn't call them fabrications, but those mistruths in FOIA response letters, absolutely provable. Fabricated documents, not so much. So Aaron, I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry that I missed it. What do you think is the best evidence for something akin to NHI? Well, I love the historical stuff. I wouldn't sit here and argue this has to be NHI. So let me kind of preface it with that. But I love the material. The stuff that keeps me interested is when you dig up material from decades ago, which to some people is fairly snoozy, you know, like they don't want to go back to the 60s. They want 2020, 2022, 2024. To me, the best stuff is back then, because what was flying in the sky was a lot less than it is now. And when you have on paper, even through the Blue Book files, which, you know, they often cite as like, oh, we investigated UFOs back then and found nothing. But when you see stuff that's talked about in these files and people that are witnessing that were from the US military and even high ranking officials, seeing technology that was going faster than anything we had at the time. And even after all this time, there's still nothing attributable to some of these cases. That doesn't automatically mean alien, but whatever it was, these highly trained individuals, highly credible, with no reason to lie, are seeing technology in the air that has no attributable explanation whatsoever. We can't even decades after go back and go, well, you know, they were testing this top secret airplane at Edwards Field or wherever at the time, and they probably weren't made aware or read in, so they didn't know. I could buy that. But we don't have that for a lot of these cases. Now, I'm not saying there are thousands of those cases that exhibit technology far beyond its time, but there are a handful. And I think that that is something that needs to be looked at, because you can't attribute that to a Soviet drone in the 1950s. You know, you can't attribute that to Chinese technology flipping through the Nevada desert. It's a different time frame. So when you look at those documents, they tell a story. And again, I'll keep stressing, it doesn't automatically mean alien, but it is so intriguing to me because you have very few explanations of what it could be. And with the passage of time, you would think that you could attribute some of these more classified programs that sometimes take 30, 40, 50 years to come out to the general public. We can now look back and go, oh, well, that makes sense. And the CIA tried that very scenario with the U-2. And one of their very first tweets when it was Twitter put out there, hey, you remember all the UFOs in the 1950s? Well, that was us. And they linked this report that talked about all the U-2 flights. And we're essentially trying to attribute all of the 1950 sightings to the U-2. Well, the problem was the U-2 didn't get off the ground until the mid-1950s. But on top of that, nothing really matched up to anything that was of interest to anybody that had any knowledge about UFOs or UFO history. Nothing matched up to a U-2 flight that have all been declassified now. We now know the dates and when they were flying this thing around. So the CIA goes, yoo-hoo, it was us over here. Ha ha ha. That's silly UFO stuff. But when in reality, nothing connected. Not a single thing of note did the CIA connect to the U-2 flights. So that was just such a laughable thing. And I actually went after documents on that very tweet and found out like the extent of the research that they did. And it was like the names were redacted, but essentially some CIA staffer says, hey, how about this? It was like World UFO Day when they posted it. And it was just that. It was like, hey, remember the UFOs from the 1950s? That was us. And then whatever superior that was in charge of approving it writes back and goes, yep, looks good. Like literally, that's what they said. Yep, looks good. That was it. That was all of the thought process that went out of this big claim. So point being, you know, you've got a lot of information that's there, that's historical, that's sure old and maybe hard to verify at this point. But to me, it's a foundation that you can build off of that shows you that there is something here that the US government and military has for a long time not been able to understand, grasp, truly investigate, and solve. They've lied to you and said that they did. The reality was that they didn't. They lied and said, oh, we're not interested in this anymore after 1969, so don't come bother us with it. Well, the FOIA proved that was absolutely a lie, that the CIA had UFO material that was being hand carried into one of the CIA scientists' offices, that you had cases that went well beyond the cutoff of 1969 that were being collected and archived and even looked into by the CIA, by the DIA, by the NSA. All of them have records that shouldn't even exist. So again, not alien, doesn't automatically equate to alien, but there's something here that the government doesn't want to talk about. And if after all of this time we had attributable classified pieces of technology that explained a lot of the 50s and 60s stuff, cool. I'd be like, you know what, maybe in time, the gimbal encounter, if everybody still wants to say it's unexplained, which I think it is, if that's unexplained and we one day may have that explanation, I can buy that, because you look back and there's all these connect the dots of these classified programs, and one day it'll seem likely that those are solved too. No, we don't have that. And that's what keeps me intrigued. And that's what keeps the list of possibilities open to me as a researcher, and just from a personal standpoint, that would include NHI. It just does. And I know a lot of people have completely shut that out. I won't. I will continue to ponder that possibility, because I think it's a big one. And I think that there's ample evidence that's out there, that the evidence that we can verify, that starts to pave the way to the possibility. Doesn't mean it's definitive, but it's a possibility. And I'm absolutely comfortable admitting that. Matthew Wolf, curious to hear your thoughts on the animosity and tension in the UFO community, particularly between Stephen Greer, Lou Elizondo, and Jeremy Corbell. Thank you. Well, I know that Lou Elizondo has had some comments about Greer in the past. He's generally, fairly professional with the criticism on the side of Elizondo. Of course, things get heated when you're talking negative about anybody. But I think, from what else I've seen on X, I think Luis Elizondo has stayed pretty tame. Greer has been more accusatory against Elizondo, which is always interesting to kind of see that dynamic. Jeremy Corbell, I mean, I just think if it's not from him or Knapp, Corbell just doesn't care. And that's fine. I mean, his shtick is his weaponized podcast and his documentaries. And that's fine. I've been very sad to see George Knapp get caught up in that and kind of fall to the same online rhetoric that, as someone who's known George for a long time, it's been really kind of a letdown to see more than all else. How do you explain that animosity and tension? I mean, I think a lot of these individuals, they truly make a living off of this. That's just the bottom line. Whether it be through documentaries that are sold through Netflix, or, go to paid ticketed events, or collecting astronomical sums of money, like Stephen Greer. Look, I commend him for making the archive free. But the last fundraising thing I think I saw him try and raise, I think it's at least $100,000 that his goal is. Look, I've run a government archive that stretches well into the terabytes. I get a lot of traffic. I get a mainstream media exposure, not just for the UFO stuff, but, for a lot of other topics as well. So I get traffic from like all over the place, and it's not cheap to run. I totally get it. That's what donations and super chats and stuff, that's what 100% of what that goes to. So it's definitely not cheap, but trying to raise $100,000, that's a lot. Like, what do you, everything's scanned, everything's online. So what is it that you need $100,000 for? I mean, I spend $300-400 a month on hosting. That's just to keep the Black Vault alive. And that's look, that's not going to break somebody. But it's a pretty penny. I mean, that's a lot of money to do when you're just giving away stuff for free, but $100,000. So I think some of these players in this conversation make a living. And I think what really upsets certain people is I have a job like away from all of this. It has nothing to do with that. I run a company that sells headphones, if some of you aren't aware, and in some various audio components. But I sell them in bulk, and I sell a lot to school districts and museums and hospitals. That's what I do for a living. That's a business I built. I'm very proud of it. I've got employees. I'm very proud of that. And I pay my taxes, I pay them on time, and I take advantage of, as a taxpayer, the Freedom of Information Act. But what kills people is that I'm not reliant on selling things back to people. And so they try and concoct these other conspiracies to try and fall back on. And I think with these individuals, some of them, that is their living now. And they make those documentaries. They try and make astronomical sums of money through donations and stuff like that, that to me doesn't make sense. So when you see other people vying for the same money, they have to attack. They have to make that other person a villain, because the pool of those that are willing to donate is not huge. So you have to bring that in. That's just the harsh reality of this. It just is. And I know that that will not be popular, and I know that people will hate me for saying it, but that is the living of some of these people. Others put their name on everything. Their name is their brand, right? So they are the brand, and they have their radio shows and their books and book deals and paywalls. And they go, you know, pay me X amount of dollars and you can hear what I have to say. I that's awesome for them if they can capitalize on that. But there's a motivating factor then that you have to consider, that you have to keep having content. I don't have a scheduled show. That's actually partially by design. Primarily, it's because I don't have time. I work about 70 to 80 hours a week on my normal job. And behind here is where I work. I have a green screen now because I'm literally in the room where I box things and ship out. So that's where I'm at. I don't need to sell anything. So I do it on my own time, simply because if you create a schedule for people to pay you money, there's a big thing that happens that I think a lot of people don't realize. That content creator has to keep you fed, right? They have to keep that membership. And so what happens is you're going to run out of content eventually if you're staying 100% legit and not trying to sensationalize. It's just not as sexy. You've heard me talk about sexiness a lot. So you have to create content, and you're going to start pulling in interviews of people. You're like, why are you pulling that guy in or that girl in? Like, this doesn't make sense. And the claims get bigger and bigger and bigger, to a point to where now you've got content. You're just oozing content to keep those memberships, but your vetting process goes way down, and your ability to critique that information goes way down. So not a popular stance, but I do these things for fun when I can, because I love it. And that's it. If I were to tell you I am going to have a show 5 nights a week, why? Then all of a sudden I'm like scrounging for crap to spew to you guys to keep you going 5 nights a week. You know what? I'd love to post more. And sure, a lot of it is time. But if I started doing a schedule, then you're just kind of grasping for anything. And I think that that's what happens with these, some of these individuals. And at the end of the day, you have to combat others. You have to push them out of the limelight so you can stay in it and make your living. And that's how some of these individuals make their living. And it comes down to capitalism, I guess. So not popular. I totally get that. But to me, that's how I look at it. And that's always kept me concerned over some of those individuals that have created a brand about their name. That's why I've always kept my name separate from the Black Vault. When you see me write, it's about the site that I built for everyone. And that to me is the brand. It's the accuracy and the fairness. Like, that's what I've always really tried to punch. I don't want my name in lights. That's, I've most social media, unless I have to have my real name, has the Black Vault, because that's something that I feel a lot of people have helped me build, in the sense that you give me that feedback and so on and so forth. That's the brand. The minute someone makes themselves the brand, that's the problem. And that's where the true ego comes in. Everybody loves to throw around the ego accusation. But when you are the brand, when your name is in lights and you continually try and get the lights brighter, that to me is an issue. Aaron, what are the ramifications you are aware of when it comes to falsification of FOIA responses? Sadly, Aaron, none that I know of. And that's the sad thing. Oops, they made a human error. They can always fall back on that. So am I going to get some kind of like help from them to really slap the wrist of somebody who I felt lied to me? No. All I can do is profile those stories and do what I can to make sure people know about it. And that's why you see me post on X a lot, where sometimes it's not worthy of an article, but definitely worthy of a post. And it's like, hey, government told me this. Here's the reality. Hey, this person said this. Here's the reality, and just profile it and go from there. Because I think it's very, very important to highlight those things. But repercussions, ramifications, no. But the more exposure to those stories, I think, do resonate inside the halls of these FOIA offices. And I don't want to paint the picture that they're all just lying through their teeth, because they're not. There are a lot of good people out there. Sadly, though, you do have some bad actors in these offices that just really don't care at all. Black Dread Scotland, do you think Mr. Elizondo was the director of AATIP, or is that a lie? That's a great question. Here's how I would term it. I've said for a long time, I don't doubt that Luis Elizondo likely worked or explored the UAP topic. I've said that for years on this channel. Again, that's another one of those things a lot of people ignore from me. What I have yet to see evidence of is that AATIP was a program that was out of OUSDI-NS. Now it's OUSDI-NS. Before it was OUSDI, when Luis Elizondo was there. I have no evidence of a program called AATIP, not to be confused with the nickname for OSAP, which now government documents support that they were using that interchangeably. I have a lot of problems with Arrow's recent report, but when they say that OSAP and AATIP were kind of interchangeable names, you can thank Harry Reid for that, because that's how he defined it when he was referring to OSAP. And in fact, he even had the acronym wrong. It wasn't AATIP as we know it. What did he have? He had AATIP, I think it was, or I forget, but he transposed some of the letters. And then when the DIA was talking about it in relation to Harry Reid pushing for answers and trying to get additional funding, they too used that wrong acronym in quite a few different places. My whole point being is that should not be confused with the effort that Luis Elizondo said he ran within the Pentagon. And there are so many references. If you guys watched, now more than 2 hours ago, so I'm sorry. But if you watched the segment earlier where the either Popular Mechanics or the anonymous source, whoever that was, for the Neil Tipton email, redacted the fact that it was like an unclassified memo. So why would you not want the fact that it was unclassified out there in the public realm? And I think the bottom line is simple. Whomever decided to do that wanted to give the false impression that this was like highly classified stuff that was going on that you guys are having the privilege of seeing in this very crazy little screenshot off at a slant with redactions and so on. And I don't like that type of reporting. There was very much a false impression to me. And again, I don't know who's to blame for that. I don't know if it was this anonymous source or if Popular Mechanics editors decided to do that. I really don't know. But to take that out showed me that there was something, do I want to call it nefarious? No, but it was narrative shaping with that. It was to give, again, that false impression. Now, why do I bring that up? Well, there's a lot of things now that shows that this whole conversation, when it came to OSAP/AATIP, or maybe even if Elizondo was doing something in the Pentagon, it was unclassified. Even Harry Reid said 80+% was unclassified when it came to this AATIP material. Again, whether or not he was referring to OSAP AATIP or the AATIP that Elizondo ran, or both, I don't know. Regardless, though, 80+%. And yet we still haven't seen any type of evidence of anything when it comes to AATIP and a UFO program. Now, is that a popular stance? Nope. But sadly, nothing has come up. And sadly, even though the government has been a mess when it has come to their public messaging on this, and I'm the first to admit it, I've highlighted a bunch of it. Even though they've been a mess, there's still nothing there to this unclassified stuff. Now, what are they doing? Are they hiding it? The Pentagon? Okay, we need to prove that, though. And that's where we need someone like Luis Elizondo to come out and say, hey, look, you've got reports on this, you've got reports on that, you've got reports on this, and be that whistleblower to tell the general public they are lying. We can't just say they're lying. You got to Got to tell us why. And as FOIA has proven, there is material that they'll cover up. Look in this very video. It's a full page of something Luis Elizondo ran about the transfer of responsibilities for AATIP to Neil Tipton. At least that's what we think it is. Why can't we see that? So is that a cover up? Yeah, maybe. That's why I'm pushing it. I'm fighting it and I'm highlighting it because it's incredibly important. But what is there beyond that? Like, what else is there? Why didn't Luis Elizondo put that memo in his IG complaint? That also is a big question I would love to ask, in that he had those emails and he showed the DoD IG those emails. Why not show the attachment? Maybe he doesn't have it. Maybe he feels it's unclassified. We know that it was in black and white, that it was unclassified. So why didn't you show that? And I don't know the answer to it, but those are all important questions that go towards answering what you're asking me, Black Dread Scotland. And I go back to my analogy of this is a puzzle, and it absolutely remains a puzzle. So was he the director of AATIP? I mean, if you ask him, the answer is yes. But where is any of the unclassified evidence, the 80+% that's unclassified? Why is it that skinwalkers at the Pentagon had to correct the record on the 2017 reporting about AATIP in the New York Times, which actually was about OSAP? Why is it that Luis Elizondo spoke about the $22 million that AATIP got in front of a crowd at MUFON when he did a keynote address as his program that got that $22 million? Why did he say that when it was actually OSAP that got the $22 million, and Robert Bigelow himself said that Luis Elizondo did not work with them on that program? Why is that? Those are all really important questions that remain unanswered that go into answering yours, Black Dread Scotland. So I'm sorry I can't answer it for you, but that's why. The puzzle pieces have yet to really come out. And that's kind of the issue for me in locking down an answer, because those puzzle pieces are still a mystery. Matthew Wolf, I couldn't agree more. They all have hidden agendas. It's sad, not really doing the type of work I view as commendable like you do. I really appreciate what you do. Thanks again, sir. I appreciate that, Matthew. And thank you for that. I do appreciate it. Aaron, is there any other facilities available to the public that might be as effective as FOIA? So I think if I'm following you correctly, is there anything else we can use other than FOIA? The answer is yes. I've talked about on this channel a lot. It's sometimes dry when you get into the nitty gritty black and white legal part of this, but you can file what are called mandatory declassification reviews, or MDR. And that's actually a different process than FOIA. It's a different part of US code and the way that works entirely. So it's separate from FOIA. And that is a way to get documents reviewed for declassification. I've used that quite a bit. The very first UAP report the US government issued to the general public going back a couple years ago, that was released in an unclassified version to the public, but we knew that a classified version existed. I was the first to get it, and it was thanks to the MDR process. So I submitted the MDR, got them to review it, and got a, albeit redacted version, got the actual classified version. So that is a very powerful tool, and it's one that I use often and encourage anybody else that uses FOIA. Make sure you know what the MDR process is and how to do it, and what the difference is between the two and when you should use one over the other. That's a video in itself because it is kind of a lengthy explanation, but make sure that you guys look at it. So that said, it looks like I'm caught up. So I am going to end the stream because I got to do my daily rounds before I pick up my son from school. So thank you all for watching. I have a blast with these live streams. I can't believe that, approaching 3,000 people at one time were watching this. So those are big numbers I didn't expect. So thank you for your support. Thank you for listening in. I have a lot of fun doing these types of videos and helping you all kind of decode these documents. And I'm always interested in your feedback as well. So please let me know whether you're watching on YouTube in the show notes below or on X. I'm also streaming this on Facebook. Let me know what you think. I love reading those comments. I always try and respond. I can't respond to them all, but I definitely try and read them all. Thank you for doing that. I will drop this as an audio format as well. So if you don't know that I do that with some of the live streams, you can go ahead and subscribe to any podcast platform. So, Spotify, whatever you use, just search for the Black Vault Radio. And then that's where I drop some of these feeds as audio shows as well. So even though you won't see the visuals, you'll be able to hear it. I know a lot of you prefer that in lieu of watching. So know that that's available. And if you're listening to the audio podcast version and didn't know that I live stream a lot of these where you can take part as well, just go to www.theblackvault.com/live, and that will bounce you to the YouTube channel. Subscribe, turn the notifications on, and make sure you know the next time I'm on. Again, thank you all for listening and or watching. This is John Greenwald Jr. signing off, and we'll see you next time.